Good morning, colleagues. If I could ask you to begin, those of you who are not seated, begin finding a seat. If we don't get started soon, we'll definitely miss our deadline to get out of here this afternoon on time. Now, we'll start with some easy things. We had some requests last night that maybe tomorrow morning we arrange some visits to the Vatican or some sightseeing for those people who have not had the opportunity to do that in Rome. So could I just see a show of hands? This is unofficial, but either I have to start assigning my team to put together a little program and maybe organize a bus or do something like that. So could you just sort of give me a show of hands if you'd like to visit the Vatican? I'm not sure the Pope will see us on such short notice. We'll try. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is a sufficient number for our team to begin mobilizing some ideas. Okay. Now, if I could kindly ask those who are presenting. So we have Angela, and we have Jonathan, and we have Helmut to come. I think your name should be up here. And if consistent with our tradition, I think I have Ibuyeti, Jonathan, Angela. Well, you guys all can read the program. So whoever it is that is on the program, please find your seats on the panel. That includes you too, Maria, because you're going to be facilitating. So I know you thought you were going to sit there and doze off, but you'll have to doze off up on the podium. Okay, please, come on up, everyone. We've got to get to work. Okay, this morning our topic is focused on the data requirements for national greenhouse gas inventory systems. This historically has been one of the most contentious issues in the discussion of RED, and one of the reasons why there was sort of a dubiousness when we first started RED as to whether we could actually demonstrate in a clear and transparent manner that emission reductions were achieved. And I recall, Thelma, I think you lost your computer on this trip. I recall a meeting here in Rome that was, I think, March of 2006. And we brought in all of the experts to make the case that actually there was enough underlying and basic data using IPCC Tier 1 default values that we could measure, report, and verify emission reductions. Now that was 2006. Here we are today in 2014, and we have made great strides in improving that basic data set and getting countries to be able to report. So we have presentations from Angela and Jonathan, and what I'm going to do, keeping with our tradition, since I have only spotty bios here, if you could, before you start your presentations, just a short bio on who you are, your experience, your background, and then get right into the presentation. Now, Angela and Jonathan approached me in a panic at the party last night and said that we had not prepared questions for this panel. So I just want to let you know that my crack team, amid all of the dancing, prepared some questions for the panel and circulated them. For both panels, they were that efficient. So, okay, Angela, please. The focus is on you.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, colleagues. My name is Angela Katongo Kabuswe. I'm Senior Environment Management Officer, Department of Environment and Natural Resources Management, Ministry of Lands, Natural Resources and Environmental Protection in Zambia. I'm also currently the newly appointed IPCC focal point person for Zambia, and I coordinate the low emission capacity building project, and I take it it's from that perspective from which I was invited to this meeting. And I should say right from the start that I belong to the Environment and Natural Resources Management Department, and we do have the Forestry Department that does most of the work on forestry. And since this is a topic that's touching on Zambia's forestry inventory, I must mention right from the start that what I'm going to present is courtesy of my colleagues from the Forestry Department. And of course, I've seen technical personnel within us who would be able to maybe respond to some of the queries that could come out of my presentation. So I think from that, I must say I'm very delighted to be here, to be invited here, because I think this is the first time that I'm joining this family of the CD-RED. I've never attended any of the previous meetings, and most of you are seeing me here for the first time, but I think I'm happy to be here. So really what I'm going to do is just to run you through Zambia's National Forest Inventory and its use on GHG reporting. And the outline of my presentation, I know that it has to be something that is brief, because I know most of you have been following the happenings and what has been going on in Zambia. So really, I thought I could just keep it short. So what I'm going to look at, firstly, I want to look briefly on the elements and the data requirements of GHG inventory generally, then look at some of the barriers that we encounter when we're doing GHG preparation, then now come down to the forest inventory in Zambia and how it's being done, some of the initiatives that are currently going on, looking at our National Forest Monitoring System, the Integrated Land Use Assessment Phase 2 program, remote sensing, RED+, the ESA GHG project, the low emission from where I'm coming from, and lastly, a short conclusion. So that is the outline of my presentation. Coming to the elements, I know that all of us here are experts and very familiar with GHG inventories. So I just want to mention that we know that compiling a national GHG inventory requires fairly lengthy and interconnected series of activities that have to take place. Collecting emission factors and activity data, selecting appropriate methodologies, estimating the GHG emissions and removals, of course implementing uncertainty assessments, and of course employing quality assurance, quality control, and procedures for that as well. And also ensuring that we're able to report the results, document and archive all relevant data and procedures that we use in this GHG reporting. So I thought I could just mention those important elements just as a way of reminding ourselves. So talking briefly on the barriers to GHG preparation, of course, some of these issues have already been discussed from the previous sessions that we had yesterday. Of course, some of the barriers include the limited resources, for we know that these are complex activities that we have to do in terms of GHG reporting, and sometimes resources may not be adequate in terms of us carrying out an effective GHG inventory. So resources are always a challenge. Then the lack of a dedicated team, I think this has been a challenge in most of our countries, where oftentimes we have to outsource services to consultants to do most of this work. So I think it's important that we have dedicated teams that could carry on this kind of work when we build capacity in them. And of course, the difficulty in retaining the capacity and expertise that we build, because it's very difficult sometimes to retain certain personnel within institutions that have been capacitated to be able to do this kind of work. And then the lack of documentation from previous GHG inventories, because we've not had systems for archiving and documentation, I think is also a major barrier. And lack of targeted training in the areas of climate change models, because we have to use those models that have been put forward by the IPCC and of course other institutions, the methodologies, data collection and management. So I thought I could also talk about briefly on the barriers. Now coming down to forest inventory in Zambia, as you know, Zambia has about 60% of the total land area covered by forests. And we have a high deforestation rate of about 300,000 hectares of forests that are lost every year, according to some of the studies that have been done in the country. And also, if you look at our second national communication in terms of the emissions from the land use change and forestry sector, we have a figure of 73.67% coming from land use change and the forestry sector, which is really very high compared to the other sectors. So meaning that for Zambia, most of our emissions are actually emitting from the land use change and forestry sector. Of course, this is with high uncertainty. And I think this is where we are saying that we need to gain information on the extent, quality, and quantity of forests for improving our assessment of the GHG reporting, if we have to have good certainty in terms of the figures that we come up with. And of course, this could also help us to be able to implement certain mitigation and adaptation measures that we need or policies in the forestry sector. We know that for us to carry out robust GHG inventories in forestry, this depends on reliable and credible systems for measuring, reporting, and verification of the changes that take place in the carbon stock. And currently, I want to say that Zambia's capacity for measuring and reporting the carbon stocks, the changes in the carbon stock and the GHG emissions is currently being addressed by a number of initiatives that are taking place in the country. These include the National Forest Monitoring System that we are trying to put in place. We have the ILUA program that is also taking place. We have the RED Plus that we are participating in, the Low Emission Capacity Building Project, the ESA GHG project, and of course others that I may not mention here. So I want to now come down to these initiatives and see what each of these is contributing in terms of forest inventories. For the National Forest Monitoring System, we are trying to put in place a decentralized National Forest Monitoring System with GIS laboratories being created in the 10 provinces of the country. We have 10 provinces in Zambia, and we have created GIS laboratories in each of those provinces with a national one in Lusaka, which is the capital city. And this is for the purpose of providing near real-time spatial data on deforestation and forest degradation. And this data is relayed to the National Forest Monitoring Laboratory, which is in the capital city of the country, in Lusaka, for national reporting purposes. And to accompany this infrastructure development that has been put in place, there were some extensive capacity building that were done for provincial cross-sector technicians in GIS, GPS, MRV, and of course GHG reporting methodology, which was done. Coming to the integrated land use assessment, I'm sure most of you are aware about this program that Zambia is currently doing with technical support from FAO and financial support from the Finnish government. Through the integrated land use assessment, this is closely aligned to the National Forest Monitoring System. And through this program, we have about 4,000 sampling sites across Zambia, which should be able to provide technically sound information on the physical characteristics of forests, as well as the socio-economic condition of forest communities living in and around these forests. So we are doing this kind of work under the ILUA Phase 2. And through this program, ILUA is measuring all necessary carbon pools as identified by the IPCC. And this includes above-ground biomass, cozy wood, debris, fine litter, and so organic matter. So this is the kind of work that is going on under ILUA 2. And we are hoping that the information on the carbon pools for the different forest types will help to improve the GHG reporting and also help the country to move to higher tiers in the forestry sector in terms of the inventories. On remote sensing, Zambia has focused so far on the historical reconstruction of deforestation and forest degradation using freely available land site data. A national reference level is being estimated from land cover classification for 1990, 2000, 2010, and land cover change analysis. This work on remote sensing is being done by the Forestry Department in collaboration with the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development in Nairobi and the UN RED. These are some of the maps that are being generated from our National Forest Monitoring System. This is showing the forest cover. This is showing deforestation, vegetation maps. So this is the kind of data that you can find on the National Forest Monitoring System. On the RED Plus, I'm sure you all know some of the outcomes, of course, have to do with forest inventories. Specifically, if you look at outcome 5 and outcome 6, outcome 5 of the RED talks about strengthening the MRV capacity to implement the RED Plus. And outcome 6 talks about assessment of the reference emission level and reference level. And I must say that for the preliminary, for outcome 6, we do have preliminary reference emission level, which was estimated in 2012. Other works that have been done under the RED Plus, we have done the study on the drivers of deforestation, which has been completed, and this highlights some of the main causes of deforestation and forest degradation in Zambia. And apart from that, also there's been another study that has been done through the RED Plus, which is the economic context of RED Plus, looking at the opportunity costs. And this has also been completed, and we are also working on a web portal for RED Plus issues, just to provide information to the general public as to what is going on under RED Plus, and of course other activities related to this. Coming to the ESA GHG, I'm glad that I'm seeing Professor Yamba from CZ from Zambia. Their institution is the one that is coordinating the ESA GHG in Zambia. And this project is working to address institutional capacity, looking at methodological choice and data requirements needed to develop high-quality, sustainable national GHG inventory systems for the agricultural and LULUCF sector of national GHG inventories. It is focused on improving the application of the IPCC methodologies and facilitating the use of more appropriate emission factors and activity data through enhancing technical capacity of designated personnel to produce well-documented and transparent inventories. And currently, I should mention that the project is working on organizing some ILUA software data entry workshop sometime in March, where experts in the LULUCF and forestry sector are going to come to fill in this software so that we can see how we can improve on data in the forestry sector. Coming to the low emission capacity building project, I'm happy because yesterday we did have somebody from UNDP who also said she's involved in this program, which I'm also involved in back home. And for us as Zambia, we have 3 objectives under the low emission capacity building project. And one of those objectives, the first one in fact, has to do with putting in place a sustainable national GHG inventory management system covering all IPCC sectors. So this is not just confined to the LULUCF or forestry sector, but it looks at all the sectors that we need to report in terms of our GHG reporting as a country. So through the low emission, a GHG coordinating institution has been identified, which is the Zambia Environmental Management Agency, which should be able to coordinate all GHG issues within the country. And apart from that, we've also identified lead institutions to be responsible for the various sectors. And since we are discussing LULUCF and forestry here, the forestry department has been designated as a lead institution for the forestry sector in Zambia. And of course, there are also others that have been identified within this same arrangement, like data providers, institutions that should be responsible for providing data for us to be able to do these inventories. And then the project is also looking at coming up with systems of how we can do data compilation, putting in place systems for quality control, quality assurance, documentation and archiving, key category analysis, and of course, how to improve the data that we have. This is some of the work that is going on under the low emission capacity building project contributing to forest inventory. And just to make a conclusion on what I've been talking about, I want to reiterate that indeed effective GHG reporting requires fundamental decisions about data and methods, the establishment of a network of contacts, because there are a number of players and stakeholders that are involved in the process. We need that so that we are able to access data, review results, and also we need to design a system for data management, quality assurance, quality control, documentation, and archiving, which has been a challenge for most countries in the past. And for Zambia, like I'd said, I've gone through a number of initiatives. These are ongoing. And what I want to say is that we need to build on these current initiatives and see how we can ensure that we promote strong partnerships and synergies among these initiatives so that we avoid duplication and also overlaps and ensure that we get the best from whatever activities that we are trying to do. So I think this is where I'm going to end with my presentation. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Kamwi. I work for the Directorate of Environmental Affairs in Namibia as a conservation scientist. I'm responsible for coordinating climate change-related activities in the whole ministry, but I'm a forester by profession. I'm going to present to you the land use and land cover mapping using remote sensing in Namibia, the work which is normally done by the Directorate of Forestry, where I worked before. The outline of the presentation, I'll quickly talk about the introduction, land use, land cover mapping in Namibia using remote sensing, then the challenges and outlook. To start off with the introduction, we have this famous paragraph which calls upon developing countries to be able to report on their GHG emissions. In response to this, Namibia has already submitted its national communication in 2002, and the second one was submitted in 2011. And at the moment, we are working on the BUR, which we hope to submit by end of this year. And we also have started the preparations for the third national communication, which we aim to submit by 2015. And all these include the GHG inventories, but in the past, GHG inventories were normally done by consultants. But the present setup is that the current staff members from different divisions will be able to do this using the capacity developed by the CD-RED project. As we all know, land cover information is very important for environmental change. And land use, land cover sector is very important in this because it contributes a lot of emissions. And then we have so far worked extensively with the CD-RED project in trying to reassign and align our national land use classes to the IPCC classes which are required for reporting purposes. In Namibia, we normally use a number of softwares to do the mapping. I will not want to bore you with the technical issues, but the key message is that we always look at the technical issues which are related to image classification in order for you to derive reliable areas of different classes. For example, we normally do separability analysis, whereby you try to separate, to be able to separate classes, land use classes of different categories, in order for you to get to see how close to each other the classes are using these remote sensing softwares. In most cases, we use Landsat images which are freely available. We normally download them from GLCF and USGS. And we normally consider all bands when we do the classification, and then we always carry out pre-processing procedures and do supervised classification. We normally go in the field, collect training sites, and then we do the accuracy assessment, which is very important in quality control. And then we normally do change detection using post-classification to be able to get the change in direction of classes. As an example, I have here the separability analysis of different classes to see how different land use classes were able to be separated by the classifier, which are normally inbuilt in these remote sensing softwares. You can see that the closer the circles there that you see, that's how, that means the classes are very close to each other, so we have to revise the classification. Those circles should not touch each other there. As I indicated, we normally have our national land cover classes, but these have to be reclassified into IPCC's classes. The table in the corner there, that's the final reclassification of the classes, which are on the other side. So it's like we have 5 classes. We don't have wetland in Namibia as such. These land use land cover maps are usually developed in two schemas. The first one is based on this IPCC classes, and then the other one is the sub-national classification. But it's important to indicate here that forest subcategories, we have two of them, which is closed woodland and the real forest. Those are the main forest land subcategories that we have. We also worked a little bit with the Regional Center for Mapping, which is based in Kenya. They assisted us in developing the maps, land use land cover maps for Namibia, but the work is still ongoing. You may not be able to see the legend there, but this is the intermediate product that we received. We hope within this year we may be able to get the final product of this classified land use land cover in Namibia. We also have challenges like everyone else. Our institutional arrangements are still somehow weak. We are still trying to sort them out. We have a small team which always changes. People go for greener pastures. And then our partners in developing this land use land cover map, which is the Regional Center for Mapping based in Kenya, is taking their time to give us the final product. At the moment, we are in the process of filling data gaps that we discovered in this current inventory, GHG inventory. And the information that we have so far will be very useful in the BUR and the third national communication that we are planning to submit by 2015. And also further support and guidance in carrying out GHG inventories is highly, highly required. And thank you for listening.
Good morning. Oh yeah, good morning, colleagues and members of the panel. Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. I'm a forester from profession, working now for over 20 years in the development corporation, GIZ, and all this time working in Southeast Asia and South America. Normally doing policy advice, but because I'm a forester, sometimes we want to go back to more technical issues. So in a few years back, I started again a little bit to get involved into technical things like remote sensing and forest inventory. When I was thinking about this presentation, I started with 50 slides. And then I very quickly realized I would run into trouble with the organizers. And I boiled it down to, I think, 14 slides. And I will limit myself to 10 minutes and to technical issues because fortunately we have here Ibu Yeti and other members from Indonesia which could later comment on the political and institutional issues much better than me. Thank you very much. So I will start. 9 minutes, I suppose. So I will very shortly talk about proposed national MRV systems in Indonesia and Forclime's carbon accounting system on district level. Forclime is a forests and climate change program supported by the German government and executed by the Ministry of Forestry in Indonesia and headed by Pa Helmi, who is also here, and he is the director of the planning department of the ministry. First of all, in Indonesia at the moment there are discussions from different institutions about different MRV systems, and the discussions are ongoing, which one would be the best one, how could they be combined, and to get to the best MRV system possible for Indonesia. So we have proposals from the Ministry of Forestry, from Bappenas, the planning, Ministry of Planning in Indonesia, and also from the new RED agency. On the right, you see the 3 districts we are working in. Each of them is around 40,000 square kilometers, and this is the project area for the Forests and Climate Change Program, where we implement our ideas how to get data and inventories which will satisfy national but also international requirements. The proposed national MRV systems, of course, they all are based on this generic concept of IPCC. And to see one of the examples how it works, oh yeah, you can see it much better than me here. You have on the left corner, down there on the left corner, this provincial system, how they think the provincial data or the local data could be integrated into the national data. So it's based on the National Mitigation Planning, RAN GRK. Based on this, they developed the RAT GRK, and from there they are feeding into the MRV system, which then goes up to the national level. And additionally, they have also the SRAP. These are the REDD activities, which generates their own set of information. So at the moment, no single MRV system yet. Overlapping responsibilities must be resolved, and the coordination between the land-based sectors is required. Now, to the program approach to a carbon accounting system. It's a land cover-driven approach. It's a wall-to-wall coverage at district level. It has a modular design for possible integration into other systems. You will see later what that means, based on classification system and stock difference-based approach. And here actually comes already the very essence of the project and the accounting system. We have on the left side the reference level, the historic reference level approach. So we use also landside data because this is the only data that goes far enough back into history that you get comparable data. So we did land cover classification, change detection, emission factors from literature, and historic carbon emissions. You know all these exercises in all the countries. I think it's more or less the same. At the moment, we are in the center of this modular system, the current carbon stock measurements. What we are doing at the moment, we are using high-resolution satellite data, in our case Rapid Eye, but we could also use SPOT, and probably we will change to SPOT because Indonesia is opting for buying SPOT data. But the systems are so similar, there will be no problem to interchange the data and the results. We do a better land cover classification and a forest benchmark map. And at the same time, we do LiDAR flights, 75,000 hectares, over in the 3 districts, in each district 25,000 hectares, only within the forest management unit, which is around 700,000 to 800,000 hectares each. And at the same time, in this LiDAR flight path, we do inventories, which can be repeated because we have also the GPS data. We are using a circular approach. And from this, we are modeling extrapolations for scaling up of the different forest ecosystem to a wall-to-wall coverage again. So we try to, in this forest management unit, to cover all existing forest ecosystems so that we get better estimates for each of these forest ecosystems concerning biomass and, of course, carbon content. From this, we derive improved emission factors, and this will be used also to update the historic carbon emission. and at the same time it gives us accurate current carbon stock maps, and then these emission factors can be used on the right side for the monitoring, which still has to be done. As I said, we are now in the center of the current carbon stock estimates. Now, this system is very flexible because we are using the classification of the FAO and also the Indonesian. You won't be able to read it, and it doesn't matter. I will tell you what you have to see. So we are using the FAO classification system, and within this classification system is also embedded the classification system of the Indonesian forests. They have adapted it, of course, and they have their own classification, but it's also comparable with the FAO classification system. We did a very detailed classification because we want not only to measure forest, non-forest, and carbon emissions from forests. We would like to know from which forest types or which use types comes the emissions as well. This is very important at the local level for planning and managing, because as Kevin yesterday said, and some others as well, only what is measurable you can also manage. But we did it in a way that we can aggregate these classifications again to the different systems at the moment in place in Indonesia. On the left-hand side, you see the system of the Ministry of Forestry, the classification system. So the first up there, we have 7 classifications: mountainous forests, submountainous forests, lowland forests, secondary forests. You could aggregate them again only to primary forests. So, and also on the right side, where we have the system, classification system of the RED agency, you could do the same. You can collapse our classification again and get the classifications which are used by the RED agency. Now, at the moment, we have the historic emission baseline ready. It's a Tier 2 assessment based on Landsat data, object-based classification and change detection, carbon values from literature from Indonesia already. And here are some of the outcomes. You see a land cover map for one of the 3 districts, in this case Kapuas Hulu in West Kalimantan. You can see the deforestation maps, so the land use changes in deforestation and degradation. Red is deforestation, yellow is degradation. And you can see also the derived carbon stock map for the district. In this case, red is not dangerous, but red are the highest carbon stock values, and green are the lowest carbon stock values. And I think that's a very important tool for detailed land use planning at the local level. Of course, you don't need this then when you are reporting to the national level and the national level to the international level, but that's what you have seen in the slide before. You just can aggregate the data again, and you can come up with whatever classification needed, up to the extreme forests and non-forests. Now, I couldn't resist to bring in some of the results as well, so that's not only theoretical. One of the results is deforestation and its drivers. And what you can see here, yellow is the agricultural sector. It's still the most important driver of deforestation in Indonesia, in these districts. I have to say, I have to limit this always to the 3 districts. But with the purple plantations coming strong over the years and already being in the 2nd place. and now being the second most important driver of deforestation in this district. Some results of the carbon stock development from 1990 to 2010. We did a historical baseline from 1990 to 2010. What you can see that in this 20 years there was a loss of 22 million or nearly 23 million tons of carbon, or 5.75 tons per hectare. And we did also a prediction for the next 20 years, and there would be another loss of around 10 million tons. This is for only one of the districts, it's Malinau, but that's more or less similar in the other districts. What you can also derive from this data is drivers of carbon emissions. Normally you would think the most important driver of deforestation is also the most important driver of the carbon emissions. In this case it is true. On the left hand, the left long column is primary forests converted into agriculture, scrubs, shifting cultivar and smallholders. But the second most important driver of carbon emissions is not the plantation sector, as it is, while it is the second most important driver of deforestation. The second most important driver of carbon emission is the forestry sector, by degrading therefore the forests from primary forests to secondary forests. So this, for me, is an important part, that we can get this detailed information on the land use, and on the different drivers of land change, degradation, land degradation, forest degradation, and deforestation. But it has not to be the same for the carbon emissions, and this detailed information for me is very important for the local governments for planning and policies to improve the situation. Now I'm already coming to my last slide, and I still haven't seen that I have to finish. Maybe I should go on. So, what are some requirements? The most basic ones are you need a baseline time period that is the same for all institutions reporting on carbon emissions. You need a classification that satisfies national and international requirements but can be more detailed at the local level. Maybe I'm able to show you this, what it looks like. Should be. So here you have the classification system we used.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What you see.
Oh, okay. It's only me that can see it.
Yes, sorry.
But I know it already.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, it worked. Okay. So you can see we used the primary vegetation, and that was divided into forests and non-forests, and then the forest sector, the forest was very detailed, and you can just disaggregate it and aggregate it how you need it at the local level or at the national level or at the international level. So how do we get out there again? And the agreed national emission factors must be used, and agreed national emission factors must be used when sub-national data is integrated into national reporting. I don't need this. Why do I say that? Because we found through our LiDAR flights and LiDAR inventory that some of the data we found at the local level are much lower, or in other parts higher than the data used at the moment at the national level. So one of the discussions will be how local data will influence or should be integrated into the national level accounting system to get more true values, and not only values based on a few studies. But that could also be of course, is also a budget issue, a financial resources issue. And just as a last remark, what we did and what I showed you here, in short, it's expensive, yes. It's around €12 or $16 per square kilometer or 100 hectares. That would mean around, if you would like to do this for the whole forest area in Indonesia, you would have to spend around $16 million to do an inventory like that and an estimation like that. Once we have finished it, we will do also a cost-benefit analysis if these LiDAR flights, which are really very expensive and which I would call the Porsche of MRV system, because I'm German and not English, I cannot use the Rolls-Royce. It is up to a cost-benefit analysis and, of course, of political decision if it should be done like this or if the requirements coming from Landsat and from more high-resolution satellites and inventory is also enough to satisfy the national needs for measuring and reporting on greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you very much, and I hope I kept more or less the 10 minutes.
Okay, well, yes, well, Kevin, you're a little bit not very informed on my background, but anyway, I am by background ecophysiologist. My PhD was on carbon exchange in lichens in the deserts. So, and my master thesis was about phytoplankton dynamics. So, yeah, I've been progressing in the evolutionary scale through botany. Well, yeah, my role in FAO is to coordinate the country implementation support that the UNRED program is providing through FAO. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's always a pleasure to see all these people. I was really impressed by the presentations to see how much engagement in improving data and greenhouse gas inventories is this project been bringing into the international arena. I think this is very good because awareness on greenhouse gas inventories was very, very low in terms of developing countries, and now, thanks to RED, thanks to this type of projects, thanks to many other projects that we see are contributing to different countries, this is being raised up to the level that I think it should be. I think it is very interesting to see the three presentations, and I would like to set the scene a bit and then provide two simple questions. So don't worry, the questions are not going to be very difficult. And I would like every single panelist to give their sense on what are the answers or the challenges that those questions posed to them. I think it's important to see that everyone is working on some main building blocks that need to be put in place in order to be able to produce robust data on carbon estimates on RED+. Those building blocks are being identified by the presentations as activity data collection, which usually developing countries are portraying through remote sensing. And I have to say that this was not necessarily the case in all developed countries because the history, the long history that they had on how inventories were collected. The second big element is how you improve your emission factors, the so-called emission factors that I mean, some people understand in slightly different ways, but doesn't matter, is what you need to move from your activity data to your carbon estimate, let's call it like this. And there, countries are using what usually is being named as national forest inventories to collect better data to improve these other sort of building blocks. And finally, you have to land all these carbon estimates into something called greenhouse gas inventory, which includes other sectors and has to have some sort of overall arrangement that will help you to, as some presenter says very wisely, to archive and manage data in the most useful way, not only for international reporting, but also for your domestic use. And that led me to identify several points which are very important. First of all, data sources. You know, you have to see what are the data sources you have for your activity data or for your sort of emission factors that you will use. And sometimes you may have more than one, or you may have some old data sources. You have to reconcile all this data in one single archiving system in order to make sure that you will use all these into your greenhouse gas inventory and your robust carbon estimates. Secondly, the data itself. You identify activity data, which is your surface data, forest cover data, and you have to identify what are the emission factors you want to use and which are the best in your progressive improvement, because everyone says stepwise approach, improving over time, not to try to start too complicated, but rather learning through the path of improving. Finally, something that was very interesting to hear was the multiple purposes of this data that you are collecting now through your greenhouse gas inventory. It's not only for reporting to the convention, but it's also, and it could become a very useful tool for management, for better managing your resources. And I think this has been highlighted by a couple of presentations very, very clearly. It is also true that depending on the capacity of the country, depending on where they are in this process, they are been focusing more on activity data improvement, or they are already on the way to improving activity data plus emission factors. And you can start simple, you can use the 4 factors to start the process, to get familiar with the process, and then improve along the way. And I think this has been messages which have been portrayed very clearly. Arrangements. It became a very, very hot topic in the presentations. Without proper arrangements, you may not be able to sustain these improvements in this system. So I think that's another important issue we have to keep in mind. And then finally, I would like to say that there are several things which are being highlighted, like, for example, a scale. We start subnational, we start national, how we reconcile these two scales. And it seems to be that everyone is aiming to reach national scale at one point in time, but may not be possible from the beginning. It is also true that people is approaching slightly differently, which doesn't mean that one is better than the other, but some systems seems to be more decentralized in terms of data collection and how the inventory is managed. Some systems seems to be more centralized. Some systems are building from small scales to larger scales. And all of them seems to be approaches which, to my mind, it seems valuable. Cost is one of the things that, while building those systems, people seems to have in their minds also. So, given said that, and I hope it was not too long, my sort of summary to make the context out of the presentations, I would like to ask simple questions. The first question is, are you confronting in your specific countries the challenge of facing different data sources that can contribute to this process, and how you are trying to resolve the problem of reconciling them? Keeping in mind that those data are used for sometimes different purposes. And my second question is, we have been talking about the importance of activity data, the importance of emission factors. How, in your countries, you are foreseeing this process of improvement towards better activity data, but I would like to focus you more towards better sort of emission factors, how you are seeing that. So I will give the floor to the panelists now, that if they can elaborate a bit on these two questions, which are very generic, but I think it could help others to see what are being the challenges and how you are at the moment in this process. Thank you very much. We're going to start from the near Kevin, I guess. And maybe 2 minutes, Kevin, you are the manager of the time.
Okay. Angela, you're first.
Thank you very much, Maria, for those questions. Maybe starting with the first question on how we can improve in terms of data sources. I think you would recall from my presentation, I'd mentioned a number of initiatives that Zambia is currently undertaking through various projects that have components on forest inventories, and they're doing different things that could be complementary to ensuring that at the end of the day we are able to improve on our data sources, we're able to improve on our emission factors for our GHG reporting. So I think in terms of the challenges from these data sources, I think what I see is that while we appreciate that we do have these initiatives currently going on, you find that sometimes because of the different project teams that are managing these initiatives, sometimes it becomes difficult to, integrate everything into one thing, because then you have to deal with different persons that are dealing with the different projects, and they've got different timelines, different goals, different visions of how they're doing things. So I see that as a challenge, but I think because it's been recognized as a challenge, it's also being addressed. And I think what we have now tried to do is we have identified all these initiatives that have similar activities, and we are trying to work on ways of how we can ensure that our activities are coordinated in a way that is going to complement these activities. So I think that in that aspect, I think we are able to address some of these challenges that are coming about as a result of having different data sources. Coming to the second question again on how we can improve in terms of activity data, I think it's important to identify the various data sources where we can find information to improve our GHG reporting. I can talk about the ESA GHG. I know that most of these projects, I think they're concentrating on more or less one aspect. Like for instance, the ESA GHG, they're working on the agriculture and forestry sector, trying to improve data emission factors in that sector alone. And if you look at what is being done under ILUA, Integrated Land Use Assessment, that is concentrating just on the forestry sector. And if you look at the low emission, it's looking at all the sectors that we need to report in terms of GHG as a country. So you find that all of them have got smaller components, but if you're able to put all these together, then you're able to come up with something that is going to, add value to the overall GHG reporting. So I think I see that if you're able to synergize, able to promote synergies with all these initiatives, I think we'll be able to address these challenges that could come about in terms of data sources.
One small additional thing that you may help, because your answer was very nice. How you see the arrangements, the institutional arrangements helping on that?
In fact, on the institutional arrangement, under the low emission, what we are trying to do now is come up with more or less like a centralized arrangement, because this is about national reporting at the end of the day. Everything that is being done in the different sectors has to come to national entity where we're able to report as Zambia in terms of even the national communication. If we'll be able to do the biannual update reports, then that is going to feed into that. So actually what we're trying to do now is to try to put in place an institutional arrangement that recognizes all the players and to see how these are going to be interlinked to each other. And I think in my presentation I didn't mention that we have designated the Zambia Environmental Management Agency to be at the apex of GHG reporting. And of course, in terms of all the other sectors, we have identified lead institutions for each sector. And for the forestry, of course, it's the forestry department that is going to coordinate within their sector. And of course, there'll be other players within that in terms of data provision, where data is going to come from the various institutions supplying the data. But all that has to be coordinated firstly by the lead institution, then going to the GHG lead institution that is going to coordinate everything so that we're able to come up with national communication at the end of the day. So I think we are working towards that.
Thank you. With regard to the other data sources which we may have in order to make sure that the national forest monitoring systems are functioning well, we may have forgotten that we can derive some data from surveys in order to get some data on how safeguards are respected, because some of these safeguards also point to the direction of as to where the causes of the changes are in cases of forest cover changes. In our case, there's actually a need to reconcile different data sources in order to ensure that they are compatible and comparable. In the cases of remote sensing data, we have to standardize or maybe use different sensors consistently. And to do so, there are a lot of challenges that we incur, because there are differences in definitions of classifications. Also, there are a lot of different actors with different intentions and needs, so we also have to accommodate their needs in this harmonization process of these different or various data sources. Also, there's still a bit of a challenge in the geographic world in terms of the understanding of the common geographical standards in order to identify common standards which have to be put in place for different data sources to be compatible. With regard to the question number 2, there's really a need to assess accuracy of these different data sources in order to ensure that countries can even move to tier 2 levels when they do their reportings. Also, country-specific emission factors will play a bigger role in this. This will also help to move to tier 2 levels. Thank you.
Now, Ibuyeti and Maureen and Tom, if you could please just start by a quick introduction with about yourselves before you enter into your comments. I think we're missing Raul from Suriname. We're going to have to check and see whether he has a legitimate excuse for missing. And let me define what legitimate is. One of our friends from Ghana isn't here simply because his wife was birthing their second son yesterday. For me, that's legitimate. You can miss a meeting if that happens. So we'll have who's going to be quality control as to whether we authorize him missing being on the panel or not. Okay, sorry, Ibuyeti, please.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Maria. And first of all, I would like to thank the coalition, FAO, GIZ, for inviting us here. We are here, national team, together with Helmut, myself, senior advisor to the Minister of Forestry on Environment and Climate Change, and together with the director and expert of forest inventory, sit there, also director national development planning, and director of research for climate change, and also director for forestry planning as a director of GIZ Forclime. I think yesterday we hear from Kevin, and thanks again. 10 years ago, Kevin waking all of us up how important forest is for climate change. So even not only under Kyoto Protocol, but also for more broader, as agreed through Bali Action Plan, we name it RED Plus under Copenhagen Accord. Now, I come to your question, talking about the data for RED Plus MRV. For Indonesia, we long experience with the forest inventory using remote sensing, at least since 1997, under FAO project, National Forest Inventory, and we continue and improve until now. So, and of course, terrestrial methodology and data collection based on sustainable forest management concept for all type of forests. This is words of UNFF, all type of forests. And I think this is a very important multi-purpose of data that Maria mentioned. So we continuously set our report of forest data to FAO. And I think this is also including what we mean by inventory right now, and reporting and analyzing, even certification of the forest. We could name it now National Forest Monitoring System, or whatever next. And what is the point of climate change and RED plus MRV? Field activities, no change from SFM, no different criteria. The key point is, other words from Kevin yesterday, report what you did in terms of carbon or carbon equivalent. Then, while we are working hard for quantifying our work in the forest or in land use base, we sometimes forgot something that we must do to keep below 2 degrees. we have to scale up our best practices, improve activities that Maria questioned, and show how big the delta of carbon under new set of activities. For Indonesia, there is a political commitment, there is a methodology, there is a data. I think the GIZ project cannot move forward. I should say that it is almost tier 3 or tier 3 without the basic system that Indonesia has. So there is political, there is methodology, there is a data, and what now? So I think my word is, let's move forward together. And arrangement, because last slide from Helmut mentioned about the arrangement, coordination and institutional. We believe from forestry sector in Indonesia, there always needs some adjustment when we want to move forward. So it is not reduce our productivity for an effort to mitigate and adapt climate change or do sustainable forest management. I just inspired by yesterday's discussion mentioned about charcoal in Africa. What really forest and climate change? And what is emission related to CO2 and a forest? Charcoal, from my point of view, or maybe other foresters in this room, is carbon neutral. So the worst scenario is when you burn the trees or accidentally burning the forest. The worst thing is you cannot release emission more than the trees absorbing during their lifetime. So charcoal is carbon neutral. But now how to improve our activity by planting more, holding more longer in a forest, and produce sustainably. So I think that's my answer to your question of what kind of activities. I think I conclude my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Yeti. And I have an apology to make. I just made a grave diplomatic blunder. I blamed Suriname for something that Guyana did. I know how terrible that is. So it is Guyana that is absent and Suriname that is present, not the reverse. I apologize.
Okay then. My name is Maureen Plever from Suriname. This is a tiny Caribbean country on the mainland of South America. On behalf of my two other colleagues, I have to thank the Coalition and the FAO for this opportunity. I have to say we all enjoyed our first visit to this nice city of Rome, and also enjoying the discussions and the talks, the opportunity that we have to mix with our colleagues that are involved in the RED Plus activities. Talking about giving an answer on the questions, first thing about the data sources, I see an evolvement of what is happening in Suriname, where when we are talking about forestry, when we are dealing with forestry, it was about how do we monitor our sustainable timber production. That was forestry for us. In the 10-year period, I see that we are also incorporating now in our monitoring systems, in our inventories, the issues of biodiversity, and now for the last few years, the issue of carbon assessment. That means it is fairly new for us. That means if you look at the available data sources and the institutions that are involved in these type of activities, the National Forest Service, what I noticed coming from the university, working in the research organization of the university, that in activities to upgrade Suriname's capacity for RED Plus and greenhouse gas inventory, lots of effort and lots of is going into the forest institution. But Suriname has more than forests. If you look at the National Forest Monitoring System, the National Forest Inventory, I feel that it is excluding the non-forest land. And if you see changes, if you see carbon emissions might be for us more in the area of the non-forest land happening. Another important thing for us being a small country with a small population is that a lot of what is happening on our land use, will be dispersed, will be very small scale. That means that we are missing them if we are using this freely available tools like Landsat images to calculate the activity data with regard to land use change. We need high resolution data for our case, but that is, of course, we need money. We will need, of course, it's more expensive to do that. So I'm planning for a more integrated approach, National Forest Monitoring System, National Forest Inventory, that we have to step beyond that it is something that has to do only with forests and the forest institution, but incorporating also the other institutions, land use institutions. Let me take an example. For greenhouse gas inventory, data like soil type, climate types are important. For Suriname, it is only available on paper format. It's not yet in a digitized form that it can be incorporated into the National Forest Monitoring data that is coming available. That is so much to say about the data sources. If I talk about the emission factors, the second, how to improve to Tier 2, for us, I think we have to, I've participated in the previous communication of first national communication, the second national communication. I think that it's possible to really improve to Tier 2 once we identified at least for the key categories that we identified. But also there I have to plead again that we need a more cooperation between the institutions in Suriname, where talking also with my colleague from the university, that the research organization has to be involved, has to take a more active role in doing research on improving emission factors, at least for the key categories in Suriname. And for the last question about institutional arrangement, of course, we need a lead institution is necessary in this case. We have the forestry institution, we have the research institution, we have the institutions for agriculture, but there is not one lead institution that can deal with scale of data priorities, and that is especially for small countries with small economies. It's necessary that we don't duplicate and we are very effective in what we are doing. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, good morning. My name's Tom Worth. I'm with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and I work on the agriculture and forestry inventory, or LECB inventory for the U.S., and also have been working on capacity building programs in developing countries for about 10 years or so through some USAID funding. And one of the offshoots of that also has been developing a software program, which I've heard many of you have been using, which is the ILUA software program, which is designed to implement the IPCC methodologies for both Tier 1 and Tier 2. So that's sort of the work I've been doing that relates to this meeting. I think, at least my perspective from hearing Maria's questions, were they were kind of linked in the way I saw it, in terms of, how do we improve or reconcile data, activity data, emission factors, and things like that. And I think the way I approach it is more in terms of having a strong inventory management system, a very strong foundation in an inventory management system, and the various institutional arrangements that are set up with the government that support that. And I think probably one of the most important things is that this inventory management system has relationships with the different data providing ministries, whether that's the Ministry of Forestry or Ministry of Agriculture, whatever, and that there's strong working relationships among those different groups so that the data that's out there within the country can be provided on a regular basis to the inventory team. And so a good way to do that is to ensure that you have good maybe even written agreements between the inventory agency and the various ministries that are providing this data. This could be something like a memorandum of understanding that documents the purpose of this data, the timeliness, when it needs to be provided, whether it's on an every 2-year basis and things like that, and then coming up with some sort of plan for improving that over time. So I think that's probably a good way to sort of improve upon the activity data and also that you're improving your inventory over time. Because I think really before we start to move on to tier 2 methods and things like that and all, I think that the most important thing is that the country builds this solid foundation and produces a solid, complete, transparent tier 1 inventory that can be used as the basis to build on in the future. Sometimes I've been working with countries and I see that they're trying to jump up to getting more country-specific factors, even trying to use modeling approaches and things like that, and yet they still have yet to develop a complete and consistent tier 1 inventory that they can use as a basis that's well documented, that if staff move out that were working on the inventory previously, that someone can come into there and see how this was done, how the data was collected, what the factors are, what the methods were used, and then use that to build on in the future. So I would just emphasize that before we start talking about moving into higher tier methods and more country-specific measured values and things like that that can be used, is to ensure that you do have a good, solid tier 1 inventory out there that acts as a solid foundation to build off in the future. And then with that in place, I think you just start to apply the good practice IPCC principles of doing a key category analysis, looking at what sources or sinks are key within your country, and then basically prioritize some improvements for the future and building off that and do that. And one of the things I talk a lot about with countries is the system that many developing countries are using to support their inventory is through the GEF funding. And so this whole process of improving emission factors, improving activity data and things like that, I think needs to be based upon this, building a strong inventory, doing your key category analysis, identifying which sources and sinks you want to improve on, what's the activity data, and then including that within your GEF application. That's exactly the kind of thing that the GEF wants to see, is a well-structured application that says, here's what we have, here's where we want to go in the future, here's the specific line items that we're trying to identify to improve. And whether that's some measurement program or improving, doing new surveys or something like that, but those are the kind of things that could be funded through the GEF and then move the country along the path of moving to a tier 2 and all.
Thank you to all the speakers. I think that the answers of the questions are being quite interesting, and I would like, forgive me if I don't pick the right points, or someone thinks may not be all the points which were made, but I would like to pick some points of each of the panelists to highlight. For example, in the case of our colleague from Zambia, it says the importance of integrate the multiple players and data sources. It is crucial. It was also said that some sources go beyond the forestry sector, and indeed the greenhouse gas inventory is more than the forestry sector, so it's part of it. So the use of the tools which are being developed for the forestry sector can be very helpful to expand to other land uses, for example, and this is what something was highlighted there. Our colleague from Namibia said that, for example, there have been challenges overseen on the different classifications. So it is important to make sure that those classifications that may be for different purposes can be reconciled at one point in time and can be integrated, sort of. It is also being said that in this context, data compatibility is the concept that we have to seek for. We don't need to fully harmonize data, maybe, but the data has to be compatible and consistent. Then our colleagues from Indonesia highlighted the fact that they were not sort of starting from scratch, but rather building upon what Indonesia has been doing in terms of national forest inventories, which were focusing on the improvement of practices in order to achieve the goals that some of them are related to climate change mitigation. And that was, I guess, a very important point. Our colleague from Indonesia was saying that, from Suriname, sorry, was saying that sometimes the focus is being too much into the forest institutions, but it's important to open to other institutions to make better use of the tools and the information which is collected. And it's important to have one led institution, but integrate all the institutions into the exercise, which may have something to offer. And I think our colleague from US, it was very interesting summary of all those things, because obviously a developed country has to have more experience on those exercises. So it's interesting to hear that someone that went through this process for many years, what is indicating is that you have to have some sort of solid platform to build upon. And that what IPCC is providing you perhaps is that the Tier 1 could be the solid platform, and then you can from there enhance your institutional arrangements, integrate data sources, and once this is done, you can start thinking in a more structured way to improve data, activity data, to improve emission factors. So I think the interventions were flowing very nicely, and I hope that we all have some important and interesting message to take home. I think I have many ones to take home with me and to use in my coming work. So, I mean, thank you for your patience. Perhaps, I don't know, Kevin, can we take any one or two points from the floor if someone feels like doing so?
Absolutely, as long as they keep in mind that they're keeping us from coffee. And as I look at some of the faces around the room, coffee is indeed needed fairly soon. So please, any comments, questions for our distinguished panel? Please. You need a mic. You need to, you're supposed to be holding up your country. I know it's Zambia, but
thank you. Topic which is I'm very passionate about, charcoal production. I like your comments. Yes, just to follow up what you said in terms of neutrality for charcoal production. Yes, it's possible. But unfortunately, from our experience, when the trees are cut for charcoal, you make the charcoal. Of course, there is some regeneration, which is taking place after that. But that regeneration, again, the communities go and cut that tree which is growing up. I think that's the challenge we have, and I think we need to do more work in that respect. But don't forget that when that charcoal is formed, nevertheless, it's burnt and counted, of course, as experts said, under energy. But at the end of the day, the overall picture that we still have emissions indirectly from the forest, from charcoal production. Thank you.
thank you. We have Federica.
Is ignoring me. Now, very briefly, good morning, everyone. And I just wanted to compliment all the speakers. I really enjoyed the panel. And, you know, Maria and Tom just bringing some light as usual. But really compliments also the countries, because it's really impressive what has been achieved in all your countries. You have different learning. You're coming from a different learning process. Some were a little bit more ahead, some starting from behind. But it's really making and showing progress from whatever was the starting point. So I think you're doing a great you're doing a great job for your country and you should be proud of. And all of you mentioned that Jonathan said, unfortunately, people sometimes when they learn, they move for a greener pasture. And Joe from PNG was saying the same things yesterday, etc. So it's important to build redundancy. How the CD-RED project can continue to help you make sure that you stay in your place to do this work that you are doing with passion, and maybe we can incentivize other colleagues of you. What can be done more to make sure that that can continue and it's not, and building on the momentum. Thank you.
Who of the panelists want to answer those two questions? Oh, sorry. I wasn't intending to ignore Brazil. Brazil, please.
I am sure about that, Kevin. Okay, sorry that I have to leave for some time, but I wanted to have a question to Angela. From yesterday, I already wanted to make this question because this issue of the ILUA software came out already yesterday. And my question is, considering that the IPCC has efforts to develop software to facilitate the implementation of the methodologies, in particular Tier 1, considering also that the UNFCCC has efforts also to develop and present software to facilitate the reporting of countries, what justifies any more specific development, software development, in face of the already existing UNFCCC and IPCC softwares?
But before you answer that, hasn't Brazil developed some software too? Okay. All right, please. Panelists, 3 important questions. Who wants to start? And not everyone has to comment, just if you have something you'd like to respond. And Angela, I think one was targeted directly to you, so.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thelma, for that question. And I saw that already Professor was raising his hand, hinting that he wants to respond to your question, so I think I'm going to allow him to do that. Thank you.
Yes, I think, to me, we need to be flexible to have as many softwares as possible, but as long as they are really compatible. But in terms of sequencing, I think 2006 software came later. When we started the ESA project, the ILUA software was already there. But the question of really complementarity is very, very important. Also the question of consistency. I have questions, big questions on the ILUA software. Last night we were discussing this issue with colleagues. You know what they said? They said, it's better you use the workbook under the ILUA. It's good for data collection, and you go and use the 2006 guideline, IPCC guideline, because ILUA has got some complexities need to be sorted out. That would be my comment from experience on the ground. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for a friend from Zambia for your comment about charcoal. Yeah, I agree with you, but please keep in mind, delta carbon, forest and climate change is simply delta carbon. So sequester more and reduce emission and keep longer in the forest. So in terms of charcoal, don't cut from natural forest, planting it with short rotation copies. Instead of waiting 10 years, you can cut in 2 years and every 1 year, I guess, in Africa. So I think it's going to make a change for that. And don't forget, with the same raw material, you are not only produce charcoal, you can produce pellet woods, you can produce torrefied wood, you can produce methanol later on. But keep in mind sustainable forest management need to be proved. Thank you.
So we also have a question from Nigeria. Chilisu? Sorry, before the question, Tom.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to respond to the ILUA software question. First of all, the ILUA software, when we try to use it in our programs, that is a software that we developed and we are more familiar with it, but we offer the opportunity for the country to use anything that's out there. If they want to go ahead and use the UNFCCC software, there's going to be a new web-based version that's going to be coming out soon. We're fine with that. If they want to use the new IPCC 2006 guideline software, we're fine with that as well. I'd note that we started the development of this software before the IPCC developed their software, so there was no competitive issue at all, and there's not intent to be any competitive issue even right now. And also that the LU software already has linkages to the UNFCCC software, and this has been encouraged by the UNFCCC. Dominique Rivette in particular likes to have the linkage. There's a button you can push once you've entered all your data, which exports files that are immediately be able to import right into the UNFCCC software so you can report. And I mean, I think the advantage of the LU is it actually lets you do tier 2. There's really no software out there that's letting you do all of the tier 2 methods, even both the stock change and the growth loss method for the forestry sector, and also has a lot of the features in terms of GIS import, uncertainty, mitigation assessment, things like that. So it's not intended to be any sort of competitive thing. We're just offering it, and if it's useful for countries, we encourage them to use it. If they don't, we're happy to help them with developing their own spreadsheets or using other existing softwares that are out there.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one quick question for Angela. In your presentation, you informed us that you have these GIS and remote sensing labs in all the 10 provinces. And I wanted to find out if, in your opinion, what are the implications of having 10 in the 10 provinces in terms of cost effectiveness and in terms of coordination? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. My country has a decentralization policy, and I think that is what we try to follow in all the sectors. We have to decentralize our activities so that it's not just at the central level. We have to take them down to where the people are, where the communities are, and they have to be involved in one way or another. So really for the forest sector, what we have are district forest offices around the country and in all the provinces. So even in terms of forest inventories, we felt that I think it was going to be a good idea to decentralize it to that level so that we can have data coming from the provinces. I know it's a big challenge. It requires a lot of finances going into that, but I think it's for a good cause. And now as we are speaking, because those in the provinces are able to do their own monitoring, I think it has helped in terms of improving forest management in Zambia. So I think it's something that we're trying to encourage because we are following decentralization policy, which is government policy.
Thank you very much. Now, in the interest of time, I'm sorry, Maria, as the facilitator, I'll give you the last word.
No, just to summarize, I guess, the questions from the floor, I think that one of my conclusions, also coming from discussions we had with the CD Red team last year, is that all these softwares are means, and are means that help you to understand better what is a greenhouse gas inventory. And at the very end, probably you may use 1, 2, 3. I mean, that's irrelevant. What is important is that you understand what it is, you understand what is behind, you understand what is behind the calculations, and you take your own decisions on how you want to proceed and how you want to improve. So that's, to me, what is the debate that we've been having about these multiple softwares, which at the end are tools. There are nothing else than that to help you. And this is the way that I think that everyone has to take it. And in some cases, you want to go a little bit further, and you may take the ILUA software because it has other features. Sometimes you need to want to start very easy, and then you take a very much more simple software. But I don't think you need to stick to particular software for the purpose of producing anything, but rather for the purpose of learning. So that was my recollection of discussions we had on that. And I think that's a good sort of conclusion of the discussions we had today. I really appreciate the questions also from Salisu on decentralized systems, because we've been working with Zambia very closely, and Zambia is making a huge effort, but they have a reason for that. We understand. But it's also true that they're having a huge effort to make sure that the centralization of the data at the very end at the national level is also well done. So, I mean, mean, thank you for the questions, Alisu, which I wanted to make myself, but I forgot. Okay, so thank you, everyone, and I think you can now enjoy the coffee. I hope it's Italian, not American, but anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. For more information, see cdred.org.